Ja, god morgon och välkommen till det här forskarseminariet om returer i klädhandeln som arrangeras av HI Research som ju jobbar med handelsanalys, e-handelsrådet som jobbar för att stärka handelns konkurrenskraft och skapa goda villkor för handelsföretagens medarbetare. Och så är det Center for Retailing vid Handelshögskolan i Göteborg som är ett forskningscentrum och som jag håller i. Och mitt namn är Lena Hansson. Jag kommer att moderera detta webbinarium kring ett fortsatt för handeln angeläget ämne när e-handeln ökar och samtidigt också kraven på hållbarhet. Vi har två talare idag. Huvudtalare är Sharon Cullinane, en kollega till mig som är professor i hållbarhetslogistik på Handelshögskolan vid Göteborgs universitet. Hon kommer att berätta om sin forskning kring konsumenters attityder till returer ur ett miljöperspektiv och hur företag kan agera för att minska dem. Därefter kommer Markus Nordlund som är CEO på Easycom att kort prata om hur e-handlare kan hantera sina returer på ett hållbarare sätt. Ställ gärna frågor genom att klicka på Q&A-funktionen. Skriv in frågan där så ska jag hålla koll och ställa era frågor till talarna. Kanske hinner vi med några frågor mellan de två talarna, annars så tar vi dem i slutet. Vi håller på i 1 timme. So to continue with this webinar, I'm now pleased to welcome Professor Sharon Cullinan, who will present her current research about returns and reverse logistics. Sharon, you may start your presentation as soon as everything is set and you feel ready.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Cullinan, and as Lena just said, I'm Professor of Sustainable Logistics at Gothenburg University, and I've been doing some research about returns for the last probably 3 or 4 years now, and we're just on to the second stage of the research. So what I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit about the results of the first stage, and then tell you a little bit about the results of the second stage. And then I'm going to tell you about what's happened during COVID, just a few little developments about what's happened in COVID. So what prompted our initial research? Well, when I was in the UK, before I came to Sweden, I went to a company called Littlewoods in the UK, and they told us that they had about 6,000 returns a day. And they basically shrink wrapped all these returns into this blue shrink wrap and put them into the corner of the warehouse and called them uglies and just left them in the corner because they didn't know what to do with them. And I thought, oh, this was very strange, but didn't think much more of it. And then I came to Sweden and I went to a field visit with the students and went to another company and saw exactly the same thing was happening. And we talked to the CEO of the company, and it revealed very strange things very surprising things about the returns journeys. And that set me off thinking, well, this really has a big environmental impact that no one's actually considering. So I wanted to find out more about it. So we put in a request for a grant and luckily got a grant from Energimyndigheten for 2 years, and then we are now on our second Energimyndigheten grant, looking at things in a bit more detail. But looking at clothing returns, you can see all these little pictures. They're all basically pictures of clothing returns. So everything gets just chucked into one of these big trolleys, and it's up to the company to sort them. But the average rate of return for clothing is about 22%, but it does vary massively between customer and between clothing types and between countries. So for instance, it can get up to over 60%, maybe sometimes even 90% for really high fashion items. And for evening dresses or evening suits, it goes up to about 90%. So you can imagine that companies are not very happy with this, and there are big environmental impacts. And when you consider that about 35% of these returns are made cross-border, you start to get some picture of what's actually happening with these returns. So basically, billions of items of clothing are being returned to retailers every year, leading to considerable environmental and economic costs. And I just wanted to show you an example of the difference between different countries and different types of clothing. So here we have a particular e-tailer in Sweden. An e-tailer that employs about 200 people. And you can see down the left-hand side, we have the returns from different countries, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And on the left-hand side, you have brand A, which is a low fashion type of clothing, and brand B, which is more high fashion, more fast fashion for younger people. So first of all, if we look at the difference between countries, you can see that in all cases, or in both cases, Finland has a much higher returns rate than the other countries. But you can also see that, comparing brand A and brand B, which is the higher fashion, has a much higher percentage return than brand A. So basically, you're talking about fashion that is sort of for young people having a very high percentage return rate, so perhaps 45% in Finland, 32% in Sweden. And you can see the volumes that that actually entails on the far right. You're talking, 167,000 items from Sweden every year for the high fashion, and 248,000 items from Sweden of the low fashion. So we're talking massive numbers of items of clothing that come back every year. And this is a company that, although it's fairly big, it's not one of the biggest players in Sweden. So you can imagine that for the biggest players, you are literally talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of returns every year, and they have to be dealt with. And in the process of being dealt with, there's a lot of environmental problems caused. So just having a look at this, I don't know, hopefully you can see this slide. This is a slide from PostNord, and it's basically asking about how many products have you sent back in return in the past 30 days. So just 30 days. And you see there that 15% of Swedes have actually returned something within the past 30 days. And that is actually, again, quite a high figure. And on the far right there, you see that women actually return about twice as many products as men return, which is quite an interesting issue as well. I think what happens is that men tend to buy something and then they buy the same thing for most of the rest of their lives, whereas women might chop and change a bit more, but that's maybe a little bit of a sexist view. Maybe this is one reason why returns are so high. This is a company's advert saying basically, enjoy your clothes before you return them. And what's happening here is that this company, who happens to be called Diesel, which I think is quite ironic as well, they said that as long as the labels are still on the clothes, you can send them back and we'll give you a free refund no matter when you return them. So they had a big high-profile advertising campaign where models and all sorts of social media people, social influencers, went out with the Diesel clothing on, with their labels to show that they actually bought it from Diesel, and then then they were able to send them back after they'd brought them out to the party. So this is a sort of idea that companies were, well, this particular company was actually trying to promote, which, as you can imagine, causes a lot more returns to occur. So returns onto new phenomena, but something that has been normalised by the continued growth of online shopping and the rise of the empowered consumer. And I think this is a big issue, is that consumers think that they have now every right to send things back, they have every right to wear a few things, send them back, they have every right to order 20 things and only keep one of them perhaps, or maybe buy 20 things and send them all back. So we have just decided as consumers that we do have the right to do this. And it is backed up by EU legislation, but EU legislation only allows you to send things back within 14 days, and then the rest of it is up to the particular company policy. But why do people actually send things back? Well, there are good reasons for it. There are some things you get are damaged or faulty, and sometimes you get the wrong item that you've received. But quite often it's that the items don't look like they do on the website, so they don't meet your expectations. Often the items don't fit because the sizing is not very standard across different companies. The customer just changes their mind and just doesn't want it after all. Customers buying multiple items and sending some back, and this is often called bracketing, because basically you buy the size that you think you are, and then you buy one size up and one size down, so you're putting everything in a bracket. And then there are fraudulent reasons, like we just talked about, like wardrobing, like you just buy something and then you wear it once or twice and then you send it back, or you rent it, or actually you send back a fake that maybe you bought on your holiday to Thailand and you try and get your money back. And that's, the fraudulent reasons are about 10% of returns. And if you look at the number of returns in total, that's actually quite a large number. Sometimes items are never even picked up from the collection point. So you might order something and you get the thrill of ordering it. And then actually by the time it arrives, you think, no, I don't actually want that. And you don't actually pick it up from the collection point. And I think this happens a lot because people are actually buying on their mobile phones, on the bus, or when they've had a few too many drinks in the evening. And then when the cold light of day hits, they're not actually too keen on actually using it or picking it up and paying for it. And returns are free usually, or cheap if not free. So what happens when a customer sends something back when they bought something online? Well, basically it goes boop into a black box, into thin air, and that's the end of their thoughts. Maybe they have it collected from their home, or maybe they take it to a collection point, and then it just disappears. No more consequences, no nothing. And of course, that's not actually the case. We found when we went to see what actually happened with returns that there was actually a very complex mixture of returns processes, which varied considerably by company and country from which the returns are being made. So as an example, we have here a pure e-tailer's Swedish returns operations on the left, and a mixed retailer Swedish returns operations on the right. So for the left one, it's a company that's just doing things on the web, and the other one is a company that has a shop as well. And I know it's very small, but what it's actually showing is that the person making the returns actually maybe drives their returns, or maybe takes their returns to a collection point. That from the collection point, it's taken by usually a van to a hub, which we might call hub level 1. It's then taken, they're usually then consolidated into a bigger lorry, maybe taken to a hub level 2, and then maybe taken to a central domestic warehouse, an internal warehouse in Sweden by a big lorry again, and then surprisingly taken to a third country for processing, and then comes back to Sweden again, and the third country is often in Eastern Europe, because it's much cheaper there. And then it comes back to the domestic warehouse where it's sent out to the customer again, if it can be reprocessed and repackaged and sent out to the customer. So something that just for the customer just goes into thin air. You can see that maybe journeys of thousands of kilometers are actually made by these packages, which is not very environmentally friendly. Whereas for a mixed retailer, we found that basically they do still get taken to hubs and taken to a domestic warehouse, and then it's usually sent back to a shop for processing. So that the journey that the package is making is a lot shorter where a shop is concerned. And here we have two companies, different Norwegian returns operation. So on the left one, we have a company that's an online company, and on the right-hand side, a company that is a mixed company. So again, we have the pedestrian, or the person, the consumer, taking their goods back to a postal point, going to a hub level 1 in a van, and a hub level 2 in a lorry, and then basically a consolidation center in a big vehicle. It's then taken to a Swedish warehouse for sorting. Then it might actually get taken to a third country for repackaging, and then it goes back to the warehouse in Sweden for sorting again. So again, a huge operation involving many different vehicles, all obviously polluting the environment, causing emissions and other accidents and things, and taking journeys that I think most people wouldn't even consider that they took. Whereas for a mixed company that has a shop, again, basically you have some of the travel is done from hub level 1 to hub level 2, but then taken back to a Norwegian shop for reselling. And quite often companies that have bricks and mortar shops nominate one particular shop in the country to resell their returns. So this was all quite surprising to us, that many companies were actually transporting their goods to foreign countries, their returns to foreign countries before they were brought back again to resell. And we tried to deal with this one. So when we came down to thinking about, well, how does this affect the environment and how could it be improved, we decided, well, we thought about a little framework that basically entails the retail logistics side of it and what you might call the consumer logistics or the consumer travel. And on the right hand side we have the consumer travel, which, and basically there to improve things we need to reduce the distance travelled by car in the returns process, because if a person is returning an item by car, that overwhelms all the other environmental impacts, because a person driving a car has huge environmental impact compared to a package in a lorry. So that's one of the biggest issues that we have to deal with. On the retail logistics side, well, we need to have 3 different approaches to reducing the environmental impacts. The first is to reduce the number of returns. The second is to improve the efficiency of the returns, and the third is to improve the environmental specifications of the resources used. So basically using electric vehicles, maybe having green warehouses, and really thinking hard about the packaging. And within reducing the number of returns, we have, again, consumer-orientated measures, retailer-orientated measures, and carrier-orientated measures. So I think we're going to just look at one of these quickly. So a retailer-oriented measure, for instance, may be education to inform the consumers of the environmental consequences of their returns, because people just don't know about them. Increased product customization and curation, which basically means trying to sell things to people that they, so that they know that they actually fit at the time. Improving the pre-purchase customer support. So if you're not sure what the sizing is like, you could ring someone to find out what it's like, or you could go to a different website to see what the sizing is like. And considering the refunds policy, and discouraging over ordering, so that you don't actually order too many things. And the retailer-oriented measures would include things like improving the quality and accuracy of the information on the website, because it's very difficult sometimes to see what you're buying. Making fewer order mistakes, obviously. Improving the returns tracking and tracing. Digitalization provisions, such as maybe digital changing rooms, etc. And considering the packaging policy to minimize the damage. And the distributor or the carrier-oriented measures would be making fewer delivery mistakes, reducing the in-transit damages, and improving the communication with the customer to reduce failed pickups. And consider unattended residential pickup options, which basically means putting in things like collection boxes, banks of lockers and things like that, so that the consumer can pick things up at any time that they want to. So when we asked a group of, we did the initial work, and then we did a bigger survey to find out from people that were in this industry and academics as well, what they thought were feasible measures and which were very important measures. And we put these into a little diagram, and basically, obviously, the things that are easiest to go for are the things that are very highly feasible, but also very important. So the things up in the top right-hand corner, and that means for the retailer, improving the websites, and for the carrier, better pickup communications with the customer. Of higher importance, but with lower feasibility, fewer delivery mistakes because companies don't think they try to minimize mistakes anyway. Operational measures, maybe consolidation with other carriers because there's a lot of vehicles going around doing perhaps delivering and picking up from one particular residential street, say 4 or 5 times a day. So if things could be consolidated, that would cause a lot of improvements. And again, unattended residential pickups. Again, as I say, if we had, in the UK, there was a proposal to make all the red telephone boxes into residential pickup areas, which I think is a really good idea. But we're starting to see banks of, well, in the UK, Amazon lockers to pick things up within. But also I have seen them in Sweden. I think Willys, for instance, Willys have big pickup locker areas. So more of those means that you don't have to make so many visits there. You can go when you want to. There's no failed deliveries, there's no failed pickups, and that improves the environmental efficiency of the pickup process. Now, what are the impacts of COVID at the moment? It's quite difficult to judge because we're still in the situation, so things are evolving as we speak, basically. But I think around the world, every country has seen a large increase in the percentage of goods bought online, including clothes. It's the groceries that have mostly increased, but clothing has also increased as a percentage of goods bought. But there has been a decrease in the overall sales of clothing as people spend more of their income on essentials. So they're spending more of their income on what they actually need rather than what would be nice to have. There have been many first-time online customers because of COVID. So, you know, people that used to go to shops now perhaps are not going to shops so much and they're buying online. And those customers have maybe different buying habits than the people who were early users of the online shopping channel. Many companies have increased their returns windows to give customers more confidence to order. So many companies have said, well, instead of having 1 month free returns, we'll give you 3 months free returns or even 6 months free returns to just increase people's confidence to buy. And there has been some evidence, there's just a small amount of evidence to show that there may have been a reduction in returns. And we think that this is perhaps because people have more time to look at the websites properly. They're spending less time on the public transport. They're spending less time just browsing quickly. So they're thinking more about what they're actually buying. So there's fewer impulse purchases. There's less willingness to actually physically make the return. So if you have to return your product to a local shop, for instance, people are less willing to go to the local shop to make their return because they don't want to be out at the moment so much. And I think there's also less money around. People are, you know, counting the pennies, maybe counting the kroner a bit more. And so they're thinking a lot more about what they're spending and they're not, again, they haven't got so much money to spend on things like clothes. So I think in the long run, there will be an impact on returns. I think that our move towards online shopping will be a semi-permanent one. I think there will be a big increase in the number of people that do order online in the future. And I think that the returns rate will probably go back up again after COVID, but we're not, you know, we need to have a look at that afterwards. But many companies are thinking about ways to reduce their returns. So what we're doing now in the next phase of the project, we had a probability survey of 4,000 individuals in Sweden carried out in October this year, well, this month. Basically, we should be getting the results next week, apparently, to look at consumer behaviour and why people actually make returns. So we're looking at the impact of the various returns policies on returns. And we're trying to link all these consumer characteristics such as age and gender, where they live, but also the personality traits of people, which has been enabled by the inclusion of a psychologist in our research team, is going to be able to link certain psychological traits to the returns behaviour of people. And this is then going to be followed up by a survey to determine the travel patterns of people making returns. Because as I said initially, that is a really important part of the environmental aspect, because personal travel is so much more environmentally damaging than goods travel on a per item basis. And then finally, with two large online clothing retailers in Sweden, we're going to be doing a data-based experiment to determine the behavioural reactions to changes in returns policies. So we're going to be able to change the returns policies of two companies and see what the impact is on individuals, and hopefully be able to link that back to their psychological profiles. And there, excuse me, in the last month, we have started to organise a new Swedish initiative with Boost, big large clothing company, and hållbarhetslogistik e-handel. This is an industry academic collaboration to try and improve the environmental aspects of online shopping in general, but our particular part of the initiative is to try and improve the environmental impacts of returns. And so what we're going to be doing in that initiative is to collect best practice across industry in order to be able to think about how to reduce returns. We're going to try and then promote knowledge across peers and consumers. And I think, to me, this is one of the really big aspects that we need to do. Part of my work over the last 2 years is to promote the findings that we've had about returns. And I have done, I think, between 50 and 60 different media interviews with media companies all around the world, and literally all around the world, who are very interested in this aspect. And I keep saying to them, I think one of the biggest things that we have to do is to basically help consumers to know that when they send an item back in the post, that there is an environmental consequence of that action, because at the moment people just don't think about it. So promoting knowledge across peers and consumers is a big thing that we're going to be looking at. Improving the traceability of returns, because if you can improve the traceability, you might be able to redirect the returns perhaps to another customer, or to a closer customer, or a closer depot. So that's very important. We're going to try and work out what the carbon footprint of returns is, and try to promote the transparency of that. And the idea then is to set some guidelines for responsible return handling, and maybe even to develop a code of best practice for returns. This initiative is going to include, we hope it's going to include quite a lot of Swedish companies. It's going to include both clothing companies and non-clothing companies, so that we can learn from each other. And I think this will be very useful. I think the fact that it's also being done in collaboration with industry will have, it has a chance of being very useful, I think. So I think I'd just like to say at the end, I don't know where I am in terms of time. Okay, yes. Returns do pose a big problem, and they do incur large costs for clothing companies selling online. And I mean large costs. If you've got return rates of 60%, you've got a lot of costs involved in dealing with that. Most companies agreed that it was a problem that was going to get worse before it gets better, so something needs to be done. And it is obvious that the impact of the environment, of the logistics involved in all this, is considerable, and that we need to reduce these impacts. And hopefully this study will, these studies will be able to go some way towards doing that. So thank you very much for listening. I don't know if we're taking questions now or later or...
Yes, well, Sharon, thank you very much. I will just ask you some questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some, you reflected over Corona. So I guess the numbers and those you showed previous, it's before Corona, right? It's not reflected.
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So someone was asking, or Corinne was asking, is the return trend the same in other countries such as France and Spain? Do you have any idea? Or
yes, it is, yes. I mean, it is very much similar throughout the world, yes.
Okay.
It's a problem everywhere.
She also reflected over that she believes that women return more often items since every company have very different sizes and, you know.
Exactly, yes. And I think many companies are trying to do something about that. They are really working hard to do that, but there isn't a standard size across different companies, and it is an issue. I remember trying to buy something that once upon a time from Hong Kong, and you know, I'm a large lady anyway, but the number of X's that you had to put in before the L at the end was about 6, you know, so you got to the XXXXXXXL, whereas normally it might be an XL or maybe an L, but it is so difficult to judge.
Yeah.
And you end up, as I say, many people end up buying 6 items just to get one that might fit them, and then they don't like the color when it gets there anyway. So it is very difficult.
Yeah, that's actually a point I was given a couple of years ago, that they say, well, it's no problem that people buy a lot and returns because they are the most profitable consumers in the end.
Yes.
But I guess it's a paradox for return and the environmental.
It is.
So, but would you say that, I was thinking, you're talking about the importance of the last mile, I guess, from where consumer get the package and get home and back.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is it then better, I mean, if I happens to buy a wrong fitting item, is it then better to keep it in the closet unused or return it?
Well, that's the issue.
Environmental.
That's another issue, isn't it? And I do think that a lot of people do that, me included, because I can't be bothered to send things back sometimes. I think that's another issue. But the one thing that I can say is that the quicker that someone returns things after they bought it, the better, because the company's then got more chance of getting it back into the system and being able to sell it again. Whereas if you wait 6 months before you return it, then the company's got very little chance of reselling it, and then it's more likely to go to the landfill. So the companies would like you to encourage you, if you are going to return something, return it within the first few days, rather than putting it in the back of your closet and then returning it after 5 months when you next cleaning out the closet type of thing. So it is better for the companies to do that. So there is a smaller environmental impact if you send things back quite quickly.
And we have some questions about if you just going to look at companies or also look at, you know, platforms for return or returns between consumers to consumers, you know, like klädhandeln and second-hand.
We are thinking about that. It would require more different type of information. And I think at the moment, but we have a bit of a problem doing the research whilst COVID is on, because I think people are less likely to accept returns from customers when COVID is here. So we have the same problem with looking at the travel patterns, because I think travel patterns at the moment are very distorted. So we wouldn't be seeing the true pattern at the moment if we did the survey. So we were going to do the travel pattern survey in September and October as well, but we have delayed that, hoping that we can do it in January and February, and hopefully things will be more back to normal. But at the moment, we just don't know when behaviour will return back to normal. So we're delaying it a bit, but you know, within a 2-year grant period, we have to be able to do it before and be able to get all the results out before the end of the 2 years. So it is a bit of a dilemma at the moment. It's a bit difficult.
So one last question before we move on. What measure do you use to estimate carbon footprint in reverse logistics? Is Ellen asking.
Well, that's a very difficult one, and it's that we have one of the members of the team, Patricia Van Loon, is looking at the environmental impacts. I have actually tried to do this in the past, and I have found it extremely difficult to do anything to do with environmental footprint. So it is a difficult issue, and we have to find the right way of doing it. And at the moment, in the last research that we did, we didn't actually try and calculate it. We just said, this is the level at the moment, what measures will reduce it, but we didn't say by how much or anything, because it is just really difficult to estimate carbon footprints. And I think any company that says that it's not is putting its head in the sand, shall I say, rather than lying. But
okay. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. And the questions keep coming, so you can maybe check also in question and answer, you know, in typing if you like, yes, or okay. We'll see afterwards. Yes. But now I want to welcome Markus Nordlund to talk about e-handelsreturer. Blir det svenska igen? Och kanske kommer du att svara på några frågor kring hur man gör det här på bästa sätt.
Tack så mycket för det. Ska vi se om vi kan få igång. Så bara klicka fram här lite, den startade från början. Yes, jag ska försöka att koppla då helt enkelt Sharons forskning och de slutsatser hon har dragit till kanske lite konkreta lösningar och också utöka synen lite grann på hur vi ser på miljöaspekten och attityder kring returer. Bara för att sätta lite mer scope på hur vi angriper så att säga utmaningen på marknaden vad det gäller returer, så tittar vi både ur ett lönsamhetsperspektiv och ur ett hållbarhetsperspektiv. Och inom lönsamhetsperspektivet så är det de här 4 områdena som egentligen har en hög påverkan på lönsamheten hos e-handlaren. Det vill säga vi måste jobba med returgraden, vi måste jobba med det faktum att vi tappar digital konvertering för att vi inte har någon schysst process efter köp. Det är en extremt dyr hantering av returer och det är en relativt dålig kundupplevelse. Men den andra vinkeln som är fokus idag, ja, men det handlar ju om miljön och hållbarheten. Och där som vi lite grann har pratat om så är det faktiskt så att det är det oanvända plagget som är det mest så att säga, eller som har sämst påverkan på miljön. Så att vi måste jobba med både det faktum att vi ska få ut plaggen i användning, alltså att vi inte blir liggande hemma i garderoben, och snabba upp processerna och styra returerna bättre för att öka sannolikheten för att de kommer i användning. Men naturligtvis måste vi också jobba med transportbiten där det idag sker otroligt mycket onödiga transporter som inte behöver uppstå med mer smarthet inbyggd i processerna. Då. Och allt det här leder ju till för mycket utsläpp helt enkelt. Och jag ska börja med att argumentera lite kring att lönsamt är hållbart. Och jag bygger upp det lite grann med att tittar vi på en full värdekedja ifrån bomullsleverantören genom olika typer av fabriker ut till den sista kedjan som egentligen vi kanske ser mest här i västvärlden, det vill säga e-handlaren då. Ja, men om alla de här aktörerna kan jobba, arbeta och genomföra det de ska göra på ett hållbart, lönsamt och kvalitativt sätt, ja men då är vi ju någonstans hemma. Då är alla nöjda och Moder Jord kan vara kvar en stund till. Men problemet som uppstår som en konsekvens av att vi då inte har tillräckligt effektiva processer vad det gäller returhantering och annat, så äter ju det här på saker och ting i våran lilla del av värdekedjan, i den delen av lönsamheten som vi har blivit tilldelad, så hanterar vi inte den tillräckligt bra, vilket gör att vi inte lyckats att få lönsamhet i våra transaktioner här i västvärlden, till stor del inom fashion-segmentet. Och det här får ju naturligtvis följdeffekter. För vad är det första vi gör när vi inte tjänar pengar hos oss? Jo, vi tittar nedströms och försöker trycka priserna neråt. Och det här följer hela vägen och pressar i alla led. Och det första man gör avkall på i de här kedjorna, ja men det är ju hållbarheten. För man vill gärna ge lön åt sin familj. Man vill liksom få sin fabrik att överleva och då börjar man att fuska och då kommer det stora konsekvenser så som vi kan titta på i världen där man i bomullsplantage som driver hiskeliga användning av vattenmängder i fabriksledet där man släpper ut alldeles för mycket kemikalier och så vidare som ibland kommer ut i nyheterna. Då. Och det här tror jag är en annan del av liksom hållbarhetseffekten, den negativa hållbarhetseffekten utöver det som liksom genereras utifrån att det sker mycket transporter och det oanvända plagget. Då. Och det här är viktigt att ha med sig. Så vad kan vi göra åt det då? Jo, vi tycker då att i och med att lönsamt är hållbart och tittar man då på klassisk retail så var liksom lönsamhetsalgoritmen ganska enkel. Det vill säga det uppstod inte så mycket okända kostnader i de processerna och det var en väldigt liten andel av returer och sånt tillbaka till butik. Den andra så att säga okända kostnaden, ja men det är liksom kostnader för butikshyra och personal och liknande. Men annars är det ganska så här, enkel modell. Jag säger inte att det var enkelt att tjäna pengar, men det var en enkel modell att hålla reda på och följa upp. Däremot i e-handeln så uppstår det så mycket fler, ganska små men väldigt många både kostnadsposter och poster för utsläpp och liknande då, i form av returhantering och så. Och allt det här äter ju på så att säga lönsamheten på den individuella plagget och faktiskt också hur lönsam och hållbar en konsument är. Och den här förmågan att kunna så att säga övervaka och titta på hur det här slår på det individuella plagget och det individuella konsumenten är väldigt viktigt. För att det exemplet jag nyss visade, ja men det var ju på ett plagg. Men i era så att säga eller i e-handelsbutikerna så finns det tusentals av plagg. Och som en konsekvens av hur de rör sig över världen och vilken returpolicy som finns som appliceras på dem så kommer vissa vara lönsamma, vissa går kanske lite break-even, men en stor mängd av plaggen är faktiskt olönsamma. Och det här beror ju då på hur mycket de returneras, vad returgraden är på de individuella plaggen, vilka transporttjänster man använder för i returlogistiken och kostnaderna för dem, vilka processer man har för kvalitetskontroll, ompack och få det säljbart igen och hur kostnadseffektivt man kan göra detta då. Och det här gäller ju precis samma sätt konsumenterna. Vi var inne på lite exempel och det här dieselexempel där man liksom promotar folk att använda saker och ting och sedan returnera, vilket är ju fantastiskt dumt på alla det sätt. Men här finns ju sådana mönster. Tittar man i kunderna på e-handelsshopparna så finns det en andel som gör på det sättet, som beter sig på det sättet. Och de blir olönsamma. Och sen finns det en andel som kanske bara gör som man får. Det vill säga man köper många storlekar, returnerar det som inte passar. Men totalt sett så är det knappt att man får ihop affären som e-handlare med det beteendet. Och sen finns det lönsamma kunder som någonstans täcker upp för de olönsamma. Då. Och vad kan man då göra åt detta? Jo, hela poängen är att med den här vetskapen och insikten om de här, hur lönsamma kunder är i realiteten och hur lönsamma produkterna är i realiteten på olika länder utifrån den här totala lönsamhets- och miljöpåverkanskalkylen, så kan man då digitalisera returprocessen och det här är ett exempel på det, där man så att säga tar konsumenten genom en process efter köp. Vi samlar in feedback för att få ännu mer information om varför kunder returnerar så att vi kan göra proaktiva åtgärder på sajt och så vidare för att proaktivt förhindra dåliga returmönster och liknande. Då. Och det här löser då upp kundupplevelsefrågan. Man håller konsumenten i handen genom processen och ger dem rätt verktyg. Nu pratar vi multipla kundresor, olika kundresor för olika typer av kunder, för olika typer av val beroende på om man är lönsam, olönsam och vad man har för beteende och så vidare. Och vi hanterar också det faktum att man tappar mycket affärer idag i returprocessen. Och tittar vi på returlogistiken, ja men då handlar det om att gå ifrån det här faktum att vi idag tar allting i samma rör tillbaka till centrallager för att där titta på och bedöma plaggen. Vi måste flytta ut den här bedömningen och mota saker och ting och styra saker och ting ända utifrån konsument. Kanske är det bättre att till och med inte ta tillbaka en retur om det är en lågvärdesvara som inte kostar så mycket. För det kostar mer än vad det smakar att ta tillbaka den. Kanske är det bättre att styra den till en lokal butik. Även om man som kund lämnar in det på ett ombud så kan det ju fysiskt sett gå till en lokal butik för en kortare transport och bättre och en inte så kostsam hantering. Så den här styrningen måste till och den kommer då dra ner kostnadsmassan på returer. Den kommer också snabba upp processerna så att vi får mindre överlager och får det säljbart fortare. Och den kommer dra ner på antalet onödiga transporter. Och hur kan vi då nyttja de här insikterna på kund och produkt? Ja, men här är ett exempel på hur en konsumentanalys kan se ut. Det är alltså en kund. Ni har köpkurvan i blått och returkurvan i rosa. Omsättningen har man jättebra koll på. Men det man kan göra när man har digitaliserat en returprocess är att hålla reda på den exakta lönsamheten, vilket i det här fallet är negativt. Så den här e-handeln har alltså förlorat 18 000 kronor på den här konsumenten so far. Och med den här typen av analys så kan man så att säga tankemässigt styra men vilka ska behöva betala returfrakt och liknande då. Uppmuntra bra beteenden och bromsa dåliga. Ha en hållbar returpolicy där man kanske tar betalt för returer men rabatterar bort den till 80% av kunderna som sköter sig. Men låt de här som missbrukar systemet betala för att bromsa dåliga beteenden. Så, det var en snabbkurs i hur vi tänker och hur vi jobbar med frågan och det man kan ta med sig från detta om ni inte har lagt allting på minnet så är det att returer är både bra och dåliga. Men vi måste främja lönsamma beteenden och hållbara och bromsa de dåliga. Jobba mot att styra er affär mot true profitability för att möjliggöra att maximera lönsamheten och minimera CO2-påverkan i varje transaktion. Och till sist, börja med att digitalisera returprocessen. Vi kan inte styra någonting vi inte ser. Tack så mycket.
Tack Markus. Det är lite intressant här. Då kan vi, här ser vi då lite hur vi ska jobba mot förbättra returprocesserna. Men har vi några frågor nu till Markus? Du fick att du gjorde en bra presentation här från Rebecka Uggla.
Tackar.
Kanske kunde du dela du hade inga problem med att dela din presentation, eller hur var det?
Nej då, den kan bli tillgänglig efteråt.
Sharon, do you have any comments? I know you're not followed entirely, but...
I think the main thing was, I think what Markus was saying was very similar to what I was saying, but in a different perspective in a way, looking more at the company's perspective and the profitability. But I think the link between the profitability and the environmental aspect is really important. And I think in this sense that anything that you can do that improves the profitability or improves the environmental aspects of things also improves the profitability. So I think luckily it's a win-win situation in many of these situations. So, and I think again it comes back to trying to reduce the number of unnecessary returns. That's going to help both the profitability and the environmental aspect. And obviously, I couldn't follow everything that Markus was saying, but I think from what he was saying was very similar in the lessons, if you like, to be learned to what I was saying.
Yes, I find it very interesting to see. Like you have to work not just with the return process, but much further back in the process and production and all that. But we had a question from Milene Fernström earlier, and I think maybe you can answer maybe both of you, but would it make a better impact to decrease the price of garment that has been returned when returned, maybe to impact the behavior? So I guess if you as a customer could get a decreased price for a garment that has been returned, and we know it's sort of instead of it have to be checked and then shipped to another country, to repackage and all that and refresh, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think it's something that we have thought about looking at, and we have discussed this for some of the retailers. And that would the customer to customer idea work? And as I say, I think in many circumstances, yes, it would if you introduced a good enough discount. And you need to have really good track and trace digitalization, which increases the cost of sending things out to start with. So there is a big development cost involved in that. But I think it is important, but I think it depends what people are buying. If they're buying their Nikkei shoes and they want them in a Nikkei shoe box because that's part of the experience, then you're not going to be able to sell things secondhand very easily. But if it's just a coat that you're not worried about the packaging and things, then I think that's certainly a possibility. But it does need a lot more. You need to be able to track and trace every single item in every single place. So the administration costs of it, I think, are going to be quite high.
Har ni något erfarenhet av detta, Markus, att företag vill ha olika policies, returpolicies, och har ni någon?
Ja, nej, men vi jobbar ju mycket med den frågan, och det handlar ju egentligen alltså på olika sätt. Det är inte bara returpolicyn som behöver så att säga vara olika och bete sig olika. Det handlar om vilken service du ger, till exempel hur snabbt du kan återbetala, hur snabbt du kan processa en bytesvara, hur du prioriterar konsumenter i kundtjänst. Så att det är liksom alla de stegen som finns i den ganska komplexa returprocessen som man kan jobba olika med beroende på vad det är för typ av kund. Om det är en lönsam, hållbar kund och så vidare. Och vi ser också möjligheter att man kan påverka säljprocessen med den här typen av information, där man i kundresan på sajt kan liksom informera och pedagogiskt så att säga informera konsumenten om vad blir konsekvenserna av mitt handlande av att lägga 3 storlekar i varukorgen till exempel. Och informera om att köper du bara en vara så erbjuder vi expressbyte för du är en bra kund, och så försöker man vända på liksom beteenden som får en väldigt bra effekt på miljön också. Då.
Mm.
I can see a question here about what do you think about if the cost of shipping and return sometimes is for free if you buy goods for more than a certain amount of kroner, and that is certainly another issue that has come up, is that people often buy things to get up to the threshold amount, knowing that they can send things back afterwards, but they'll have got their free delivery to start with. So this is another policy that does encourage overbuying, which isn't necessarily a good thing. And also, I didn't mention in my presentation, but there's a big move towards try before you buy. So you don't actually have to pay anything before you actually get it, basically. So, and that also encourages over-purchase. And I think there's also many different companies now that are staggering your purchase, so you can pay for it over like 5 different times over a year. And that, I think, also encourages people to overbuy, because then they know they only have to pay back a fifth of it this month, and then they have to pay back the rest over the next 6 months or something. So there are many different policies, I think, that are trying to encourage people to overbuy. And I think some of it goes back to what you were saying afterwards, Lena, is that there is a fair amount of research that actually shows that the customers that buy the most, that return the most, are also the most profitable customers. So there is a desire, in a way, to get the customers to buy more, because they know that even though they will return more, they will be better customers anyway in the long run, because they'll be more loyal to the company. So there is a lot of contradictory policies around, really. That doesn't help the environment very much, shall we say.
And regarding the cost issue, we can also see patterns where consumers, buy to be over the free freight threshold, and then they return an item just to give the free outbound shipment, so to say. And that is also something that is possible to control and steer if we digitalize the process and keep track of these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Ja, Christer Ove, han föreslår ju det här med ranking, alltså as a customer, if you behave well, you can see how good you're doing. So that maybe work.
Yes. I think there are companies that are definitely trying to target the bad customers, the ones that send back everything, and obviously the customers that do have obviously used things before they send them back. So I think the companies are getting to grips a little bit with this. But as I say, and as the previous person said, I mean, digitalization has a huge part to play in all this. But digitalization comes with a very big cost. I mean, it is expensive to do these things. And for companies that are trying to think about how to digitalize, there are so many different aspects of the operations that they can concentrate on. It's very difficult to know where to start. And digital changing rooms became very popular a few years ago, but it's suddenly become less popular again now, as it's realized that it is so expensive to do, and it's not necessarily impacting things in the right way. So it is, as I say, it's you can see the path ahead, but it is an expensive path, and it's a difficult one for companies to choose which direction to take.
So I can see that time is running out. We're just, the time is now 9 o'clock, so I have to thank you very much. But did you have some last comment, Markus?
No, I just want to challenge that a little bit, Sharon, because yes, it is a complex process and it's complex to do things, but it's also extremely high return on investment based on our experience. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities and great return on investments.
I think it depends. But if you make the right decisions and you go in the right direction, then it can be very profitable. But so many companies have poured so many tens of millions of kroner into digitalization that hasn't actually worked. So I mean, when it goes well, it goes very well. And when it doesn't go well, it can cost a fortune and lose the company, its business completely. So, it is a difficult one. You do need to make the good decisions.
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you very much for everyone. You our guests here talking, and that's also our audience. And I hope to see you back at the next seminar that will pop up at some time in the future, I hope. So thank you very much for today. And take care.
Thank you.
And stay well.
Yes,
Stay well.
thank you.